The former head of UK Border Force, Tony Smith. Hello, Tony.
Hello.
The French have been complaining for a long time that a pull factor to the UK for illegal immigrants is the ability to work. Will digital ID make it harder for them to do just that?
It may do, Mark. It's a bit early to say until we see the detail, but it certainly won't stop illegal immigration. What happens now is when people come in on a small boat and are given temporary admission into the communities, they aren't allowed to work for at least for the first 6 months of their period, but they do that. When immigration enforcement go out to raid places where they're working, they find them, but there's very little punitive action they can take because the migrants themselves are already in the asylum system, so they can't be arrested and deported. They don't have any money, so they can't really be fined. We have tried to stop support for people found working illegally. The courts have challenged that, so you can't do that either. So what we really need is an immigration enforcement system, whether or not you've got an ID card, which says that if you're found working illegally, you'll be deported from the country. At the moment, that doesn't happen. If you're arrested for working illegally, you won't be deported from the country. You'll just be put back into the backlog. There may be things that can be done about the employer, because the employer does have a statutory duty to check your credentials to make sure you have got a permission to work, and can suffer quite significant penalties if they do that. But there are quite a few get out of jail cards for the employer as well, and there is quite a big market in forged documents circulating around, which will try to bypass, if you like, those employer checks, which the employer will say, well, I'm not qualified, I didn't realise that was a false document. So the whole idea of this digital ID is not of itself going to stop illegal entry. In order to stop illegal entry, you need to detain people when they enter illegally and deport them from the territory immediately. Yeah. And that's not what we've been doing, I'm afraid, either under the last government or under this one.
Could this reduce illegal immigration from France by even a few percentage points? And if so, would that make it worthwhile?
Well, I think there are benefits more broadly to knowing who people are. In my experience, as you know, the migrants don't have any documents when they arrive here, so we don't know who they are. We lock them into an identity. We ask them for their name, date of birth, nationality, which we have to take their word for, but we do a biometric registration. We have their fingerprints, we have their photographs, we know when they entered, and we know what they told us. We do that in the visa system, we do that in the new ETA system now. So we have got quite a lot of data based on biometrics, and I am a big fan of biometrics. It's very hard to change your fingerprint and change your face, and many of us are now using biometrics, for example, unlocking mobile phones, accessing our bank records, so on and so forth. So I think biometric ID in itself will help law enforcement more broadly, and actually will help those people who want to access services and get lost in the morass of logins and government ID login codes and HMRC login codes. For those that want to, would have a single unique identifier which would help them access those services. But the main purpose of this is to stop illegal working. In order to stop illegal working, you've got to stop the migrants getting into the workplace in the first place, and that means detaining them on arrival and not admitting them into the asylum system, not accepting applications to stay under the Torture Convention or the Human Rights Convention, and removing them directly to the territory, either to France or to some other third country if we can, or to their source country. We really must get back to focusing on removal. So identity is a part of it. I think it will help, but it's certainly not a panacea.
Stay with us if you can, Tony. We've got Chris in Bolton. Chris, what's your view on this?
Looking at it from a practical point, the digital ID will make dibbly squad to stopping migrants working illegally. Just look at the places they work at. They don't work at Marks and Spencer's or Lloyd's Bank. They work in a backstreet takeaways and car washes. Yeah. They will get paid in cash. The amount of cash, and I'm qualified in bookkeeping, by the way, the amount of cash they get paid will be so minute that those companies will just probably put it down as sundry expenses. So it won't, and because with such small amounts, anyone looking at the books will probably not even notice. That's how they'll get around that. Does Keir Starmer really think that these companies like Uber and all the rest of them, do they really think that they're going to suddenly ask for ID? Of course they won't. Nothing will change. This is just Starmer gaslighting us to make us believe that he's getting on top of illegal immigration. It's nothing of the sort. It's just sound bites. It will do nothing at all to stop illegal immigration. This is a man who is incompetent. He can't stop the boats. He knows he can't stop the boats, so he's doing this to try and make us all think, oh, aren't Labour wonderful? They're getting on top of the situation. Nothing at all.
Thank you very much for that call, Chris. Tony, is this policy political cover for Sir Keir Starmer, given his failures to, and I quote, smash the gangs?
Well, I think what's happened is he's listened to Tony Blair and what Blair was saying back in the noughties. I was in the Home Office in those days, and we were preparing actually to introduce a national ID register in 2008, 2009 in the UK Border Agency. We were gearing up to have everybody seen by an official where your biometrics would be captured. You would be put on that register. Of course, that was cancelled when the coalition government came in 2010 with the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, and it's now being resurrected as part of that plan. So I think they have listened to what Blair had to say, but I think Labour have admitted themselves that actually they made, as have the Conservatives, have made a number of errors, haven't they, over the last 20, 25 years on immigration, and particularly on illegal immigration. I think this has now become the top topic, and as I say, although digital ID I think may help in some areas of government management, it's not going to work unless you have that removals deterrent. So the people we're talking about, I mean, the enforcement teams do go into these places that your caller was talking about regularly to check. The employer does have an obligation already under current law to make sure you have a right to work. That will either be by presentation of an ARC card or some other form of identity, and they are obliged to keep records to show they've done that, and they can be fined quite a lot of money if they don't. So the penalties are there already for the employers, but the disincentive for the worker is not there. We need to disincentivize the workers from doing it by saying, if you are caught working illegally in this country, that is a breach of the contract under which you were admitted, you will now be detained and removed from the territory. And we can't do that while we're still wrapped up in this morass of international conventions on asylum, human rights and torture convention, because as soon as they get to the police station, then their lawyer will lodge an application to see if that's not already in the process, to say you can't remove him. He fears persecution or whatever breach of his human rights for if you arrest and deport him, and he goes back in. Now, when that message goes back to Calais and beyond, the answer is, well, you can come in here. You might get caught for working illegally, and your employer might get done for it, but don't worry, nothing's going to happen to you. That is the fundamental problem they've got to fix. We've got to start getting back to the mode where when you find an illegal worker in the community, the immigration officer has the power to arrest you, detain you, keep you detained, and remove you from the country, because that is a breach of conditions. And I'm afraid, Mark, until we fix that, no matter what we do with digital ID, that's not going to stop disincentivize illegal crossings.
Tony, briefly, if you can, if we get a new administration in 3 or 4 years' time and we exit the ECHR, tear up the Human Rights Act, look at the Refugee Convention, pull every lever that's available, can we stop the boats?
Yes.
Wow.
And you can see, Mark, that's happening in America. I was on a talk show last night in America with what's going on under, Tom Homan, and so there is evidence that yes, you can if you are really robust about your legal frameworks. But we need a really radical approach to our legal frameworks, and I'm afraid I haven't seen anything so far from anyone in government to deliver that.
No, that's politically difficult, isn't it, for the Prime Minister? Tony, stay with us. We've got actually the Prime Minister speaking about the rollout of mandatory digital ID. Take a listen.
This government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that.
Here's another concern I've got, Tony. If some illegal immigrants can't work because of this infrastructure and technology, will they turn to crime?
Yes, I'm afraid there is a very clear evidence, Mark, already of links between irregular migration and crime. Some of them have been trafficked into the country. They are in bonded slavery. They owe the people that brought them across. They will be involved in all kinds of crime, be that prostitution, unskilled labour. Obviously, we have had a very significant rise in crime from certain nationality cohorts who recognise the opportunities of getting here for criminal purposes and the proceeds of that. Illegal immigration is a very profitable business for international organised crime in the same way as drug smuggling or any other form of smuggling is. So there is always going to be a risk that we have created a black economy here where people are actually disappearing into our communities, creating mischief. But even then, Mark, comes back to the same point. If you commit a criminal offence in this country and you're in the asylum system, you should be deported, right?
Most definitely. That would be common sense.
You know, that doesn't happen. You go to court, Mark, and you can say this, but you might be able to get a prosecution, but that does not automatically mean removal. If you're claiming asylum or human rights, you can't send me back to Syria, Eritrea, Afghanistan, Iran, because that breaches Article 3 of the ECHR, then we won't be able to remove you anyway. And so the punishment has to be deportation. We need to get to a situation where criminals, as well as illegal workers, overstayers, are arrested, detained and deported. That used to happen, Mark. When I was an immigration officer back in the 70s and the 80s, I was empowered to do exactly that. What happened in the late 80s, 90s, all these magic words, human rights, asylum, torture convention, started creeping in to the vocabulary to the point where we haven't got control over our borders anymore, because it's been taken over by this raft of international legislation and human rights, which means that we know full well, our officers know full well, that much as we would like to arrest and deport people, we'll end up arresting people, but we will end up putting them back into the pile because we simply can't remove them.
Let's have a bonfire of all of it. Tony, a privilege to have you on the show. Tony Smith is the former head of UK Border Force. Could digital ID be Keir Starmer's poll tax moment? Could it bring down his premiership?